Hello team, it's time for the Daily Detangler. Getting VUCA'd. Wanted to talk about that, and I don't know about you, but getting VUCA'd is pretty much a daily thing for me. So I want to talk about speed bumps, physiology that happens, and the idea of choice. And one of the things that I'm borrowing and leaning into is the work of Dr. Alan Watkins. He's the guy who did a video on being brilliant every day. And so I'm going to share a little bit about that. And also just some of the things that happen in my own thinking around what happens as I'm interrelating with the environment, what happens with, ambiguity, uncertainty, complexity, and what are the things that, can get in the way in a moment by moment situation, right? So in a previous detangler, I talked about the journey of detangling over time. And in this particular detangler, it's about a moment in time and what happens in that moment in time. And this is at the suggestion of Catalyst, who suggested I do that, to look at the moment in time and to explore that. So that's what I'm doing. In the overtime piece, where I looked at tangles over time, I talked about this idea of the backward bike, and I used that model as a proxy, the backward bike. And I talked about how Dustin, in the backward bike scenario, he observed, he got disrupted, he associated his effort and his work with the idea of being scientific. He realized a different type of outcome, and then he integrated his new bicycle riding skills and adopted that. And along the way, he had some journeys, a journey of relating and how he overcame those speed bumps of relating. He had a journey of kind of stumbling and falling to learn how to read the back and ride the backward bike, and there was some speed bumps there. He had some speed bumps along the way of committing, and he wanted to stay committed, and it took him many months to actually figure out how to ride the backward bike. And he made it fun, and how he overcame that. And then as he was testing out the backward bike, what did he learn as he was overcoming the speed bumps of testing it, what happens, and how his son was able to have the ability to ride the bike sooner. And then how he accepted the fact that the brain could be wired and rewired with that concept of neural plasticity, and riding the backward bike. And then he actually could ride the backward bike, and then he actually went back to riding a normal bike, and he shared his journey around that in Amsterdam. And so I had mapped that out in the speed bumps detangler and over time. In this particular detangler, exploring the concept that Dr. Alan Watkins shares in his actual video on this idea of what happens below the line and above the line in how we engage. So if you think of a situation, and perhaps you've been VUCA'd today, or you got VUCA'd yesterday, maybe you're working on something and a call comes in, or maybe you are working on a concept and you're deep in thought and you get 20 emails coming in and texts, or maybe you're working with somebody else and it's a struggle to relate to what's happening, or a struggle to understand, right? And it takes a lot of back and forth. And maybe you've worked with somebody in the last month or so, and it was hard to get in the zone for whatever reason. So what's happening with that? And did you get VUCA'd? And has VUCA injected and inserted itself and shown up to your party, and kind of change the environment and change the atmosphere? And what happens when we get VUCA'd? So I'm using this concept of VUCA'd as, well, here's a challenge, here's a ping, here's a question, and then here's another ping and another question, and another ping and a challenge, and another ping and another challenge, and a question comes in, and there's this interruption and disturbance. So the environment, the volatile environment, can actually create a barrier. There's uncertainty about, like, what do I do next and how do I do it? That can create a barrier, or in this case, a tangle. And these tangles create challenges in performance. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I struggle to figure out what to do and how to go about it. And these inputs can create a barrier to performance. So in the video, Dr. Alan Watkins shares this idea that many people focus on what they do and kind of their actions and behavior that lead to performance. And he gave this story of a golfer who struggled and actually, pretty much fell apart in the last few holes, and they couldn't figure out why. And it had to do with below the waterline. And a lot of us, myself in particular, end up getting hit with feelings of, and if you think about the human nature detangler, the feelings of anger or sadness or joy or disgust, these feelings happen and they affect the thinking. And that thinking is what drives behavior. So Dr. Alan Watkins shares that, and I've broken that down in a lot of previous detanglers. But one of the things that he does, and this is what Catalyst suggested I do, is to look at what's happening at a moment of time of somebody getting stressed. And it has to do with their emotions, which is energy and motion, and their physiology. And let me share with you what he says by actually let you listen to him directly. It's best to get this particular one from the source. So let's hear from Dr. Alan Watkins for about 2 minutes.
But you don't realize that because you feel all right. You're not noticing any of that. You're just thinking what you're thinking and doing what you're doing. So what we're saying is that the brilliance every day requires on you to tune in to what's happening down here at the physiological and the emotional level, and not only become aware of that, but get control over it. Because most of you do not have the control at that level. In fact, very few people have got control of any of this stuff on the inside. And even when people have been highly trained on regulating their behavior, even they haven't got that much control over this. So that's the source of your brilliance. If you can get control over the whole thing, you can crank out your A game every single day.
And so what he does in this video is he walks through what that looks like. And it looks like this. He brings up a guy up on the stage and he hooks him up to an EKG and monitors his heart rate. And everybody can see his heart rate on the screen. And the Dr. Alan Watkins, who you just saw, starts asking a bunch of questions. And the physiology of the person on stage changes. His heart rate changes. And that heart rate affects his emotions. So let's take a look at what that looks like.
So how do you get control? Well, we've first of all got to start with which bit of the physiology. Given that so many different signals, where are we going to start? Well, we're going to start with one specific signal, which is the electrical signal of your heart. So your heart beats. So when your heart beats, ping, 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 ping. If you watch, the medical programs, before it goes beep, which it always does, doesn't it? So the ping is, the heart basically contracts and causes a spike of electricity. And you can measure the distance between each heartbeat. And I don't know whether you know, but the distance between each heartbeat varies over time. So if we look at your heart rate over time, we'll see that your heart rate will vary up and down, like that. And if you go to the doctors, he takes your pulse rate and he says the average is 70. But in taking the average, he's ignoring all the variance, and it's the variance that really matters. Taking the average, you lose all the critical data. That's like listening to Mozart and saying the average is da. Was that Mozart or was it Pearl Jam?
So this idea of variance is what really strikes out to me. Is it's really hard for me to keep an even keel. Using my dad's language, you've taken, have an even keel. So how do you, if you think about a boat going through the water, a ship can actually be pretty steady, because of the way it's engineered. And so this idea of monitoring and understanding physiology and emotion is critical to me in a VUCA environment. And I'm terrible at this. Like when I'm under stress in my personal life, or I'm struggling to figure out what to do, it's really difficult to keep my physiology and my emotion in check, especially with my emotion of feeling like I'm not doing enough, or I'm going to get rejected or whatever, right? So this negative loop here is massive, and I've really had to work hard on managing that negative loop. You know, this idea that what is happening in my, you know, chest cavity, my muscles tightening, my heart rate increasing, the anxiety I feel in the pit of my stomach because I'm tangled. What does that do to my energy level? Does it bring me joy? Does it bring me sadness? Does it bring me anger, disgust? What is it? And paying attention to that over the past 6 months, I've really, my pattern, you know, just being transparent, is I get the input that causes a tightness in my chest and and kind of butterflies in my stomach. I get tightness in my chest and butterflies in my stomach. And my natural reaction is a sadness, a heavy burden when that happens. That sadness drives a lot of my behavior, and it's really not not a fun feeling. And I'm pretty sad all day long. So this has been something that I've worked a lot on. You probably know me. If you know me, okay, that makes a lot of sense. You know, and where does that come from? It doesn't really matter. Yes, I've worked on that. There's a lot of things I can do to affect this. There's a lot of things I can do to affect this. There's headspace. There's exercise. There's positive affirmations, rituals, the synthesis digest, the things that I've been sharing along the way. But my natural reaction to the VUCA environment is my heart rate to go up. There's a tightness in my chest. I can actually feel my tightness in my pecs, between my pecs, right in the center of my chest. I can feel it. And then my stomach, my butterflies. And then that overwhelmingly becomes sadness, which, you know, I think catalyst is joy. He likes it. I don't know. So I think we have two opposite responses. But so I've had to work on that. And there's also, I mean, there's other things I can do. You know, there's interpersonal things I can do to surround myself with more positive people. There's you know, choices I can make. I can choose to be more joyful and more happy, because happiness in a lot of cases for me is actually a choice. That's a whole separate issue. And I can even, you know, go crazy, if you will, and take a lot of medication. There's medication that can make me happier, right? I haven't done that, you know, but that is an option, right? So there's things I can do to, and there's a lot of research out on this physiology as in people's relation to stress. The reason why I'm sharing that is it's normal to have any of these responses down here, and not a lot of people are aware that they happen, and that affects their thinking. So I see a loop happening in the work that we're doing. We change how people think, which then affects their physiology. So at a moment in time, how you think can be impacted, which is why, you know, we focus on positive experiences. We want them to be positive and fun. We want people to view hang gliding as fun, and that fun can create inputs into physiology where this is joy, right? So that's why, to me, experience matters. And there's a lot of this that can happen in the context of the change. Look, we're gonna change how you think about strategic accounts. Oh shit, I'm on the defensive, or I'm going to feel, you know, I'm going to feel sad, or does that bring me joy to solve a 3D puzzle? And in 3D puzzle solving, what's my emotion? Do I feel joy, sadness, anger? What is that? energy in motion. What does that translate into? And these feelings then drive the thinking. And this can be this thinking loop, or it can be a pattern that's interrupted into something positive. All of this happens, and it's like, 80-20. There's a lot underneath here that impacts me underneath the waterline. And I think that's the key, is at a moment in time, what is that and how does that work? And Dr. Alan Watkins talks about it. And one of the things that I've learned a lot from is Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And Viktor Frankl, it's an amazing book. It's really short, but he was in a Nazi concentration camp. And he was Jewish, and it was really, really tough. And he came to a realization in that concentration camp. He came to a realization that the people who survived were the ones that had hope. They had an internal, approach and mindset to life. The people that died, a lot of them that died had their negative mindset, and they had a negative view on life. And we would call that a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset today. But he talks about how that plays out in these really tough conditions. And he's the person who really came to this enlightened view of the world, that really nobody can take away what you're thinking. And the flip side of that is you're in control of what you're thinking. You ultimately have control and nobody else. And he wrote in that book, in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And he wrote that in a concentration camp. And he survived that concentration camp. And he realized that it's the scene of the growth was the mind. And also the scene of the crime to, retrench and to not grow. The scene of that crime is the mind as well. So the mind can either be a crime scene or it could be a growth scene. And what does that look like? And that to me is what Dr. Alan Watkins is talking about in the context of what happens in your physiology, and are we in tune with it? And as Watkins said, the people that can control all of this are the ones who can be brilliant every day. And for me, this is such a powerful thing. I can go days and weeks better at managing it, and then one little thing happens and I stub my toe, and that, how do I choose to respond to that is critical. So what happens in that is really important as a moment in time. We all have inputs and outputs. So I have on a daily basis things that I'm converting and outputs I'm creating. And all day long, I'm either figuring stuff out or getting stuff done. And there's a lot that can fill that space. In the context of this being brilliant every day and getting VUCA'd, it can impact it. But what is impacting it? Well, it's the inputs I get in the form of a stimulus and a response. So there's been a lot of science on the impact of stimulus and response, right? There's Pavlov dog theory. You ring a bell, you feed the dog, you read the bell, you feed the dog, you read the bell, ring the bell, and then you don't feed the dog, but the dog has a response, and it's been conditioned. And this conditioning over time is what's critical. And that conditioning over time is what I've had to work on in the context of getting VUCA'd. So what happens in here is critical, because VUCA is a constant stimulus. VUCA is a constant change, and it's a stressor, and I don't like it, but it's the new normal. I can't get away from it, and it's never going away. So how do I respond to that? And am I in tune with what is happening there, so that I can pattern interrupt my natural tendencies? How do I interrupt my natural tendencies? And it's by understanding the physiology, the energy that gets put into motion from that physiology, and the natural knee-jerk reaction to be sad. right? Like I'm just wired, wired to be sad, unfortunately. And I'm working on changing that, and I'm actually making lots of progress, right? So that, what is that gap? And it has to do with, as Viktor Frankl said, a choice. So what is the choice? And this is an interesting realization that I had many years ago. And it's this idea that it's not a one and done choice. It's choices all day long, every day. I literally have a choice every single minute of every single day. It's all a choice. Everything's a choice. And that's what one of the perks of living in the United States. We have unlimited choice, and we have free will as human beings to exercise our choice and our quote unquote rights that we have, right? So those choices all day long come into play. And the choices that I have to do with what's my purpose, what action can I take, and what do I choose to be aware of. And this is what I came up with, of thinking about the idea of Viktor Frankl. What is he focused on? What's his purpose? What's his calling? What can he really control, and what really matters, and what actions is he taking to understand it? And then the thing that makes this so powerful and is awareness. And there's a lot of learning I could be doing on awareness, right? So awareness of what's happening internally in my own little being brilliant everyday pyramid, but also awareness externally, and how that affects the stimulus and the response that I give and get. So these are choices, and they happen in the now. And that's the big realization of this is VUCA is an ongoing thing, but it's VUCA in the now that matters. And my response, and my ability to choose my response, is something in the present as well. So how do we stay in the moment? How do we stay in the present? How do we recognize our physiology and what's happening in that physiology? How does it impact our emotions? And then how does that emotion affect our thinking and our doing? And understanding this and being okay with being tangled, and the feelings of being tangled, is part of breaking free, because the scene of the crime is your mind, or the scene of growth is your mind. And that's the key to being VUCA'd in the moment, is recognizing that I have a choice, and that there's a gap between stimulus and response. And in that, I have a response ability. I have an ability to choose my response. And that was from, Stephen Covey. I have an ability to choose my response and what I do with it. And, it's 1,000 choices or more. And maybe the good thing is 950 of them are right, but the 10 that don't go well can be highly disruptive. But 950 went right, and that's what I have to focus on, because it's why I'm here, and am I aware, and how does it help me become even more aware, so that I can take action in the present. So that's been today's daily detangler on VUCA in the moment. I have courage, and am talking about what my natural reaction is to getting VUCA'd, sharing what I've been doing to interrupt my natural tendencies, and how I react to stress and getting VUCA'd, and leading with me. All right, thanks a lot. Hopefully this is something you can relate to, and I'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks.